what the pharmaceutical industry does is they'll say, hey, there's this pathway that goes like this. This binds that happens, this happens. And if we take this one step right here, right, and we make that 100 times more powerful or 1,000 times more powerful, well, then we can get a better effect out of here, right? And that's what they do with sleep drugs, right? So, so after melatonin is secreted and a bunch of cascades change, one of the primary things that happens is neuropeptide GABA, capital GABA. That starts getting produced in huge volumes, and that slows down the brain, right? So really, the best definition of being asleep is not being awake, right? So what happens is like all your sensory still working, right? Your motor still, like you can still feel, smell, touch, see, like everything still works. Your brain's just not paying attention to it. And that's because of GABA. It lowers what we call the resting potential of a cell. So you think of it like a capacitor. Capacitor, you put in a tiny little bit of voltage and bam, you get a huge, right? Well, we lowered that energy. It's like, well, now you got to put in 5 times as much energy to get that capacitor to fire. So it lowers the resting potential of a cell. That's what GABA does. Well, a benzodiazepine, like Valium or Xanax, that binds a GABA receptor. Different molecule, looks to the receptor kind of like GABA. It binds that receptor and has 100 times the effect of GABA. A Z drug, like Lunesta, Ambien, 1,000 times the effect of GABA. So all they're doing is saying, we're shutting the brain off. That's not what sleep is, right? Like I said, that's one of the things that happens is the best definition as far as like what we can perceive is that we're no longer paying attention to our environment. We're not interacting with our environment. But that's just a piece of it, right? It's almost a byproduct of all of the cascades that are going on. The benefit of sleep is the hormone production, the repair, the acceleration of your immune system, the consolidation of memories, the categorization of emotional events. All of that crap has nothing to do with GABA, right? Has nothing to do with that. That's all sorts of different neurotransmitters, all different changes in the brain. And so what it really did is, what sleep drugs really do is they dissociate your brain. So it leaves you with the lizard brain, right? The 4Fs, the fighting, fleeing, fornicating, and freezing, right? So, and it leads to animalistic behavior. So when the pharmaceutical industry wants to get a drug approved, they do the research. They come up with the idea and they go, hey, I wonder if this would work. And then they do the research. And then they say to the FDA, hey, this really works. Here's the research. There's some over here, but we promise it's the same.
This is where cherry picking comes into play.
This is the representative stuff. This is all you really need to know.
These are the scientists they pay.
Right. Now, once they get sued, now we had to get, all right, let's see if you were hiding everything. Now we pull in all the research. So that had happened right before I started working with the SEALs, and that's how I found out what Ambien really did, right? So what was happening is guys, the worst cases were people who lived in places like Vegas, right? Because they were taking this drug, it was completely dissociating their brain. And then they would go to a casino and they would gamble away their life savings. And they would come home and get back in bed and they'd wake up the next morning with no memory whatsoever of going to the casino.
What?
And all of a sudden they'd be like, what do you mean my bank's overdrawn? What are you talking about? Or they'd go pick up prostitutes, or they'd go to the all-you-could-eat buffet, right? Animalistic behavior, right? And so that's when we get to find out, okay, what is Ambien really doing? Just dissociating the brain and making you think you're asleep. Legions of sleep studies where, a guy takes Ambien every night, and you're like, okay, well, take your Ambien when we do your sleep study tonight, because we're trying to find out if you have a sleep apnea, right? We're not trying to figure out if you sleep or not. We're trying to figure out if you have sleep apnea. So go ahead and take what you normally take. And guys will lay in bed, get up and do things, whatever, and they would have no recollection. So after a while, the doctors are kind of figuring out this, like, you realize you were only in bed 2 hours, right? Like you were up doing, and patients are like, what are you talking about? Like I got in bed at 10 and I got up at 6. It's like, no. You got in bed, you laid there, you got up, you started looking at your phone, you did this on your, like we came in there and told you to lay back down, all this, no recollection of it whatsoever. So once we've really got the research, it showed that the best case that they actually had for the Z drug was that you would fall asleep 13 minutes faster. You would sleep for 37 minutes longer, but reduces REM sleep by 80%, and it reduces deep sleep by 20%. So it's a huge net loss, right? You're getting 37 extra minutes of sleep with almost no REM. well, you lost a lot of sleep, right? You would be better to get 37 minutes less than 100% of the REM that you were going to get. And then if you use alcohol does exactly the opposite. So alcohol decreases deep sleep by 80% and REM sleep by 20%. So when you take your Ambien with alcohol, which is what all the SEALs were doing when I got started in this game, I would send them in for sleep studies, and their sleep studies came back 99.9% stage 2 sleep. And every sleep physiologist, every sleep doctor would tell you that's not possible. They couldn't possibly survive that. Like, there has to be something wrong with the study, but every single SEAL I studied had that. And so, you know, in those days, I mean, I know you're in that scene too, like in kind of that early paleo kind of CrossFit crazy.
Yeah, I did the 20X with Mark Devine. And I used to go to the SEAL Fit Center in Encinitas.
Yeah. And so,
I mean, I wasn't in the service, but I knew a lot of the guys.
So but you knew all the things that everybody talked about, Rob Wolf's podcast, and everybody talking about, you know, the zone diet and paleo diet and CrossFit and nobody was talking about sleep. And I came in and started talking about sleep and said, hey man, I learned this because I had to, because the SEALs needed the help and I didn't know how to help them. And I figured out, hey, I think this Ambien might be a problem. Let's get guys off of Ambien. But you know, we could go through the stages if you want to, but, you know, obviously you're rebalancing all of your hormones, you're repairing, you're restoring, you're replenishing, there's all sorts of beneficial things going on that nobody knew.
I want to go deep into that with you because it's been 5+ years since we podcasted last. And I remembered looking at the analytics yesterday, and like tens of thousands of people listened to our last episode. Now we're a lot bigger, so the impact can be a lot stronger. But I find it fascinating that, like, did the government hire you? Did the Navy hire you to figure out why their investments in these SEALs weren't paying off, essentially? Like, they were like, hey, we have these elite special forces people, yet their sleep is tanked and then they can't perform for us. So it begs the question, like, how much is each SEAL who's been through BUDS, who's in active duty, how much are they actually worth? Like, what's the investment from the government in these guys?
Man, that would be so beautiful if they had that kind of foresight.
It's got to be over $1 million per SEAL.
It's way more, right? So the SEAL teams are plagued by a few things, right? And one of the biggest ones is the 85-ish% attrition rate, right? So people go, well, that's cool. It means it's, you know, the guys who make it are the right guys, right? It's a really hardcore. Okay. But what it really means is that 85 cents of every dollar you spend training is wasted.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure they're interested in that.
Right. So you get 200 guys to start a BUDS class and 25 of them finish. And you're like, all of that money you put into those other guys, like, you know, other 175, that's 100% wasted, because there's not like second tier SEAL or like almost SEAL. Like there's nothing. It's like, if you don't make it through SEAL training, you go do something totally different, completely non-related. Yeah. And so really, since the beginning of SEAL training, they've been trying to crack that nut. Like, what makes somebody successful? Nobody's been able to predict success. What people are getting much closer to is predicting failure. And really what it's kind of turning out to be, not surprising to anybody who's a SEAL, it's like the more adversity you've been through in your life, the more likely you are to make it through SEAL training. So if like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is your parents got divorced, you're probably going to have a tough time at BUDS, man, right? Like, it's probably, like, I'm not saying you won't make it, but I'm just saying, like, if we're betting, you're not the guy I'm betting on, right? I'm betting on the guy who had like a totally, you know, desperate life situation growing up, and abuse and homelessness and drugs and who knows what else, right? All kinds of crazy stuff. But to answer your question, you know, it's millions of dollars if you divide up all the people who didn't make it. You're getting 26 guys out of 200. It's you've put millions of dollars into those 26 guys. They aren't even close to being SEALs. They just made it through the basic training. They made it through the training that says, oh, we believe we can train you to be a SEAL because you've been through this, right? Now we've got millions of dollars more of training to make you into a SEAL, and millions more to make you like a truly proficient SEAL.
If you love that video, you'll love the one on the screen right now. Click the one on the screen and enjoy.